Good afternoon, boys and girls. Uh, this is going to be a preface of a series of videos I'm going to try to put out, mainly because I think we're in a time that it's hard to figure out what information is real information. All right. One of the things I want to do is, first and foremost, I want to go over to the Code of Ethics for journalists. Right. Now, whether or not I think this Society of Professional Journalists is accredited or not, they're the only ones that I don't see to be like completely biased. It's actually very difficult to find a good list of Code of Ethics. This one I think is probably as close to a real Code of Ethics as you can get. So, talking about Code of Ethics, there's many other Code of Ethics I have to follow. I am a security professional, information security professional, and I can lose my entire career over an unethical act. So, because we do have the power of, as information workers, as gaining or gathering information that is harmful to others, or putting a system at risk. Anyways, I want to go into the Code of Ethics here. I just want to put that out there just because I'm well familiar with operating within a Code of Ethics. I've had to for 35 years in one form or another, being in the military. I could lose my degree, I could lose certifications, I could lose my career by failing to uphold Code of Ethics. So for today, we're going to go over the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics. There's other ones out there, very few and far between. There's some from like the the New York Times, which I don't think I can trust them to be impartial in any means. So I can't really say that I trust what their opinion on the Code of Ethics are. And I've looked at university sites with journalist degrees, and haven't really gotten too much information. Albeit I haven't also spent an incredible amount of time digging in too much. I'm very busy lately, and so I just go with the best information I can find within a reasonable period of time, 20 minutes or so. Anyways, the preamble. The Society declares these four principles as a foundation of ethical journalism and encourages their use in the practice by all people and all media. All right. The four tenets here, the four principles: seek truth and report it. You see that here. Act independently, be accountable and transparent, and minimize harm. And minimize harm, I think, is a big thing right here, right? And be accountable. In this day and age where accountability is laughed at, I believe that you owe it to yourself to hold yourself accountable, but you also owe it to others to hold others accountable. Anyways, we'll get to that. Seek truth and report it. A journalist should take responsibility for the accuracy of their work, verify information before releasing it, use original sources when possible. Use original sources means talk to somebody, right? You're talking to somebody, not a Wikipedia page. And if you start using a Wikipedia page, then it becomes like commentary, I suppose. Remember that neither speed nor format excuses inaccuracy. So what that means is that just because you're rushed to get an article out, or I guess the format, which meaning nowadays print or online media, doesn't excuse the inaccuracy. So don't make excuses. That's universal. Don't make excuses. Provide context. Take special care not to misrepresent or oversimplify in promoting, previewing, or summarizing a story. This right here, I think, is hilarious that people that they call themselves journalists on the mainstream media and a lot of print or virtual print news, is that they do misrepresent and they very much do oversimplify. Gather, update, and correct information throughout the life of the news story. So this is about when journalists used to be journalists and they're actually trying to break a story because they're trying to tell you what's happening behind the scenes. as opposed to what we get nowadays is kind of like you reach in the bottom of the Cracker Jack box to get the prize out, and then the next box is opened up, and we never really follow back. And then when we do, we call it what do they say that is, like Mad Owl, what's she do? Conspiracy theories. They say when you're gathering and updating information through the life of a news story, you're a conspiracy theorist. And there's a big difference between saying, the what the DOJ is doing right now is the same as the flat Earth experience, right? Okay. Anyways, and you're seeing my biases already. So yeah, I am biased. By all means, I'm biased, but I'm biased because I can prove the other side wrong. Be cautious when making promises, but keep the promises they make. This is integrity. All this right here is saying is have integrity, and that's what all this right here, seek truth and report it. A lot of this is an integrity check, right? What is integrity? Simple definition of integrity is you'll do what's right even when nobody else is watching, right? And that's hard to come by. It really is. I don't know how many times I've seen from young kids, young men and women, you ask them to do something, they'll do a perfect job while you're standing there looking at them, and while you're not doing anything else but focusing all your attention on them, so now it's taking two people to do one job, but you leave them up by themselves like, hey, by tomorrow I need you to have this done, and you come back tomorrow, and they're just starting the job when you show up. You're like, God damn it. I needed this to be done today so I could get more work done. Now you've slowed me down by an entire day, So that's a lack of integrity, being dishonest, or not truthful, I guess. Anyways, identify sources clearly. The public is entitled to as much information as possible to judge the reliability and motivations of sources. How many times in the past few years have we seen buy an anonymous source, buy an anonymous source, buy an anonymous source? Well, that's just made up, as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of people, I think, us old fogies think it's made up. And if you start thinking critically about it, people's opinions are being steered and swayed by made up stories. And that's going to play into a couple more videos I have also. But anyways, consider sources and motivation or motives before promising anonymity. Reserve anonymity. Sorry, that's not one of my favorite words. For sources who may face danger, retribution, or other harm, and have information that cannot be obtained anywhere else. Explain why anonymity was granted. So, we're not talking about somebody might just lose their job, right? That's not great harm. Somebody getting killed is great harm, right? Somebody being thrown in prison for the rest of their life is great harm. Think about things like Snowden and Julian Assange with WikiLeaks and what Snowden did. Do I agree with what they did? Yes and no. I believe, though, at all times that whistleblowers should always go unpunished, unless, of course, they're proven to be false, right? But when they're proven to be true, those that are participating in the whistleblowing activity to shed light, what I call putting a light on the vampires, should never be punished. Like the Obama administration was great with throwing whistleblowers in prison. So that's why I don't completely disagree with Snowden. Even when he did his actions, I wish it would have happened in a different way, and only because that's in context for what I used to do for a job as well. But the information he released, I think we should have known about that. I think that information should have been out there. Anyways, I did not agree with how he did it. But that's not an accusation of anything. It's just my personal opinion. So and I can even be swayed on that because over the years of thinking about it, he might not have had a choice to do it any other way. And also, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So, people going up here and misrepresenting or oversimplifying a story to slander somebody. So, and it's hard to get through that misinformation without talking to the source. And then you also have to understand that source may be trying to sell you something. Okay, diligently seeks subjects of news coverage to allow them to respond to criticism or allegations of wrongdoing. So if you're willing to shake a stick at somebody, you should be offering a debate, right? And they don't teach debate anymore. They don't teach having two opposing sides working together or share their sides of the story. So many of you younger people don't even understand what that is. You just understand yelling at somebody and the loudest person wins. So anyways. Avoid undercover or other surreptitious, I could probably pronounce that word, surreptitious. So avoid undercover or other surreptitious methods of gathering information unless traditional open methods will not yield information vital to the public. All right, so you're not a spy. You're not a spy. Be vigilant and courageous about holding those with power accountable. Give voice to the voiceless. I think in a lot of ways that's exactly what journalism should be. I think this right here should probably be one of the main tenets right here. But we also have to be selective about who that voiceless person is, right? So, because anybody can be a scam artist. Recognize a special obligation to serve as watchdogs over public affairs and government. Seek to ensure the public's business is conducted in the open and that the public records are open to all, right? So that's one of the things, like the big thing, I guess, the past 15 years has been the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. I used to have to handle FOIA requests all the time. And, it was very interesting. And I believe it. I mean, it kind of lends itself to an academic flair. Everything's open. But at the same time, as taxpayers, we should be knowledgeable on where our money is being spent. Provide access to source material when it is relevant and appropriate. Boldly tell the story of diversity and magnitude of the human experience. Seek sources whose voices we seldom hear. And I don't think the diversity here means what we think about diversity in the local or the local time lexicon, where diversity means that the person that has the biggest sexual predilection with different skin color has a loudest voice. No, diversity just means you're not asking the one group of people that are all group thinks. They're in that group think tank, and they're all going to give you the same exact answer, with very little diversity in their answers. What you're seeking is 360, 360 by 360 information, so you get all visible angles on that center point of the topic, what you're talking about. Avoid stereotyping. Journalists should examine the ways their values and experiences may shape their reporting, and what I talked about at the beginning of this was bias, right? So you have to be careful of that. Label advocacy and commentary. So advocacy means that you're supporting somebody. You're going to say, hey, I'm supporting this group. Here's why. And you're more on one side of the debate. And commentary is just pretty much saying, this has no journalistic integrity. These are my opinions and my opinions only. And that's mainly mainstream media at its finest right now. Advocacy, they're advocating one side of the story, and they're purely commentary. There's no breaking news out there. There's very few actual journalists out there. I think Brett Baer, I don't know. I imagine that guy's a wild man behind the scenes, but and even like what's his name that did the debate the other night. He's not a bad journalist. I think he gets down there. Maybe he wasn't the right person. It's like I watched Tim Pool's Timcast IRL the other night, or last night maybe, and when they were talking about, he didn't even do the research on things like the critical race theory training that's been going through the government. True, being somebody that's been a government worker, a soldier, and so forth, not a government contractor, not a government worker, but and a soldier, and seeing this stuff been happening for the past 25 years. Everybody should have been more knowledgeable about it. So they're, like, what's his name, Chris, that did the actual debate. He was the MC for the debate. I think he was just believing the stories that he saw when you Google something, and it was just the headlines. It's like, oh, it's just racial sensitivity training. Well, Actually, I don't even believe in racial sensitivity training. I mean, as a soldier, and being a soldier for 25 years, everybody's green. Everybody's green. Just do your goddamn job. Anyways. Never deliberately distort facts or context, including visual information. Clearly label illustrations and reenactments. So you'll see this on TV shows that try to be kind of documentaries. They'll say there's a document or a reenactment or an illustration. And deliberately distort facts or context, including visual information. What they're talking about is these graphs, right? They show this huge spike, but you're not seeing what the numbers are, what they're measuring. So it could be from 1 to 10. And there's like, yeah, there's a huge spike today from 1 to 10, and it's been flatlined at like between 1 and 3 for the past, however many days or months or years. And all of a sudden it's up to 10. But what they're actually measuring is 1 to 1,000, right? But they're just saying that 1% or that 10th of a percent is really statistically significant. And they can make it seem so when, it fits their needs. Right? Because they're trying to tell a story. They're not adhering to journalistic ethics. Never plagiarize. Always attribute. If you've ever gone to college, this is a big thing. I'm a big stickler on this. Never plagiarize. I don't care if you can copy and paste an entire 20-page document. Right? You don't have a single thought of your own in that thing. You just copied and pasted it as long as you source every document that you copied and pasted from. Right? Everything's in quotes and everything's attributed. You do your proper citations, and you don't do that. And you pretend that it's just your creativeness that created this. Then I can't hold you as somebody with any integrity at all, and that's what this comes down to, is integrity, right? So, like I said, you can, all plagiarism is not attributing somebody else's work. That's all that is. You can write a book and copy and paste from other source materials all over the place, as long as you put the proper citations, and then the appendix has your references. And that reference page, you do something like that, it might be as thick as the paper you're writing itself, but whatever. At least you did your due diligence. Second tenet, minimize harm. Ethical journalists treat success, subjects, colleagues, and members of the public as human beings deserving of respect. And I 100% agree with that. Balance the public's need. Journalists should balance the public's need for information against potential harm or discomfort. Pursuit of news is not a license for arrogance or undue intrusiveness. And what that means is you're just not allowed to step on somebody's doorstep and beat on their door until they, call the police. And discomfort, I'd like to see that a little bit more defined. But some people just don't like any kind of, conflict at all, even having hard discussions. They can see that as conflict. Let me go ahead and close this little box. Show compassion for those that may be affected by news coverage. Use heightened sensitivity when dealing with juveniles, victims of sex crime, and sources of subjects who are inexperienced or unable to give consent. Consider cultural differences in approach and treatment. Now, cultural differences, there's a reason why you have a whole big cultural ethics class in universities, at least with the master's course, I think. And it's because some people, they're culturally different. Some people see, some cultures see that making eye contact with each other is more appropriate, where others see that looking away is more appropriate. And we might see that somebody looking away is hiding something, or they're shy, or they're just being weaker. It might not be the case. So you have to learn these things, and this is a big subject unto itself. Recognize that legal access to information differs from ethical justification to publish and broadcast. And what that means is that just because you might have legal access to something doesn't mean that you have, you may be acting unethical because you may be harming somebody else by publishing this information. That's what they're trying to say about like Andy Ngo right now in Portland, when he's just posting public records. Those information or those records are already posted for the public to see. He's just putting on a media that has more visibility and where he clearly has 1 million people hating him, so they're going to see it. Whereas they could just go to the Portland Police Department's media pages, media release pages or whatever for every day and get that same information. I realize that private people have a greater right to control information about themselves than public figures and others who seek power, influence, or attention. Weigh the consequences of publishing and broadcasting personal information. And I think this should be done all the time with anything, not just journalists. Even like you're a web designer or something like that, or just writing on Twitter. But those people that write on Twitter aren't real journalists now, are they? Do they adhere to any of this? I would probably say not very often. Avoid pandering to lurid curiosity, even if others do. Hey, CNN. Hey, MSNBC. Hey, Vox. All right. Balance a suspect's right to a fair trial with the public's right to know. Consider the implications of identifying criminal suspects before they face legal charges. And right now, this fair trial is also this court of public opinion. And judges have. We're going to talk about judges in the further on video. They have so much power to destroy somebody's life based on no facts. Right? They can do that, and they have very little, if any, oversight. So judges have a scary amount of power, and you putting that information out there could sway the opinion of a judge to deny somebody their civil rights. And no matter what they've done, everybody deserves their civil rights. Consider the long-term implications of the extended reach and permanence of publication. Provide updated and more complete information as appropriate. And what this means is words don't go away, especially in the internet age. Newspapers still exist from 100 years ago, and we can still source this information. We used to have microfiches in the library. I think they probably digitized all that by now, and libraries share information amongst libraries. That libraries are just one big library for all intents and purposes. Act independently is the third tenet. The highest and primary obligation to journalists or ethical journalism is to serve the public. Journalists should avoid conflicts of interest, real or perceived, and disclose unavoidable conflicts. Conflict of interest is saying, simply put, that I'm writing a story on say this organization. And oh, by the way, I have a relative or a spouse that works at this organization, so I may be perceived as having a conflict of interest. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you overly bash them to try to deny that conflict of interest. So it means to be fair and equitable. And if you can't do it, then you have to give up the story. Refuse gifts, favors, fees, free travel, and special treatment, and avoid political and other outside activities that may compromise the integrity or impartiality or may damage credibility. So, and even in the government, you have, I used to have to meet with vendors quite often. And did I get sometimes the $150 dinner? Yeah, a couple times, but I also reported those. In the government, generally speaking, you're not allowed to accept a gift with a value over $20, right? But sometimes when at least if you take something like, oh, that was an expensive dinner, that you've reported to the appropriate sources, right? So your boss, your leadership, and so forth, saying, hey, this may have been a conflict of interest because of ethics, And that goes with a lot of business ethics as well. And just imagine how ethical you can see many of our politicians are if they do accept all of these. They don't refuse these gifts. Be wary of sources offering information for favors or money. Do not pay for access to news. Identify content provided by outside sources, whether paid or not. And, be wary, generally speaking, they're trying to pay somebody else to write their story for them because they want that. They don't want to be attributed. They're going to be that anonymous source, right? They just want that bullshit put out there, and you be the one that's on the hook for your name's on the byline. Deny favored treatment to advertisers, donors, or other special interests, and resist internal and external pressure to influence coverage. Wall Street Journal. Or I'm sorry, New York Times. Wall Street Journal, I don't, sorry about that. That was a mistake. Distinguish news from advertising and shun hybrids that blur the lines between the two. Prominently label sponsored content. That's going to be very hard nowadays. You know, this is what you boys and girls, I need you to actually be very aware of what you're reading, how deep you're taking that information. Are you just reading it to for your own confirmation bias, or are you reading it critically, right? So a big part of our part on this is reading critically. Be accountable and transparent. Ethical journalism means taking responsibility for one's work and explaining one's decisions to the public. A journalist should, and this is the fourth tenet, explain ethical choices and processes to audiences. Encourage a civil dialogue with the public about journalistic practices and coverage and news content. Respond quickly to questions about accuracy, clarity, and fairness. Acknowledge mistakes and correct them when promptly and prominently, Explain corrections and clarifications carefully and clearly. Expose unethical conduct in journalism, including within their organizations, and abide by the same high standards that they expect of others. So, this accountability and transparency, you'll see that this is completely blown out of the water in mainstream media nowadays, especially this one right here, where they'll put out an obvious bullshit story and make a correction at 2 in the morning the next day. You know, because they're worried about the money, right? So they're up here with having conflicts of interest with their donors, with their advertisers, and so forth. So donors are special interest. They're making a lot of money on those clicks, and then they'll come back and they won't be prominently displayed. There'll be like a little subline at the very end of the, oh, this was corrected, and you don't even know where it's corrected. You have to use something like the Wayback Machine to figure out what the correction was. Anyways, boys and girls, I wanted you to see what the Code of Ethics are. I want you to read news stories, hear news stories, listen to news stories, see them, whatever, and I want you to apply these to the person that's presenting you the information. I need you to think critically about the information that's presented. And what I mean by critical thinking, I have a video on this earlier. It's very kind of high level, but it's asking questions, being a dissenter. I have another video on that, being a dissenter. So not trusting the information automatically by somebody just because they tell you you're supposed to trust them. So that's the end of this video. I want to put this out because it's going to be kind of a preface to many other videos I'll be putting out here in the near future. Have a great day, boys and girls, and I'll see you next time.